So many of us as entrepreneurs work in isolated circumstances that we don't necessarily get that opportunity to speak to other people that do the same things that we do.
If you go out and you meet people, that's where you're going to make those contacts. The reason I was one of the co-founders of this insurance company. We actually have 3 insurance companies now. Is that I went to a friend's birthday party and another guy who I kind of knew, but hadn't seen in years. He's now the president of our company, and he was the original founder with me. I'm not going to say I didn't have a little bit of Scotch whiskey. You know what I'm saying? It was delicious. And, the more I drank, the more we had this idea to start an insurance company. And suddenly it sounded doable face to face. That wouldn't have happened on a Zoom call. Okay. No offense to Zoom. It happened because we were talking.
Hello and welcome back to Storefront Strategies. I'm delighted to be joined today by Stacey Giulianti. So first of all, Stacey, I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience with a 60-second pitch of who you are and what you do, please.
Sure. 30 seconds. Let's do it quick. My name is Stacey Giulianti. I am an attorney by trade. I am the chief legal officer and a co-founder of Florida Peninsula Insurance Company, which is a United States and Florida specifically based homeowners property insurance company. We offer homeowners insurance and renters insurance and condo unit insurance in the state of Florida. And we do about $1 billion a year in annual premium so far. So that's my background.
That's a lot of zeros.
It is. It is. It doesn't all go into my pocket, but it is a lot. You have to keep an eye on it. Someone has to.
So with your extensive experience in insurance law and as a co-founder of Florida Peninsula Insurance Company, what are some of the common legal challenges that new business owners should be aware of when starting their ventures, and how can they proactively address these issues?
It's a really important question because when you start off your company, there's a lot of landmines or hurdles that you can trip over. And I think it depends on where you are in the world, but I think most places have very similar entity types that you can look at. So the first thing you want to do is determine the form of ownership. How are you going to own this? In some places, your business might be a not-for-profit. I actually met the chief legal officer of Google, and we were talking, and he said at the beginning of the company, when they formed Google, they thought they might make it a nonprofit, not even a for-profit company, because they wanted to. I didn't know that until I had talked to him. Some people think that you can do something as a nonprofit. That may be a form of ownership, a partnership. Now, when you do a partnership, of course, you need to make sure the person you're in business with is someone you can trust, is someone that is going to work just as hard as you. There are certain types of legal partnerships. You could be a corporation or an association or entity. Virtually all countries have that type of protection so that you're not personally liable. If you just start doing something and signing contracts as your own name, you're personally liable. So you want to have a company. We have Florida Peninsula Insurance Company. We actually have about 7 or 8 different subsidiaries of our holding company that do various parts of the business. So you want to make sure that you're protected by having that. The other thing I think you want to look at the beginning is what is the industry specific licensing? Every business, if you're in the food business, very specific health regulations. If you're in insurance, we are a regulated business. The government looks at us in every state and every country. We are looked at just like banks are. And so that's something you need to learn before you start launching your business. What is the industry specific licensing requirements or rules that you have to go with? I think that often trips people up. But one thing that really ends up tripping people up is they mix their personal and their business finances. And this is a bit of a legal issue as well as kind of an accounting issue, but right, you get a check for something, so you put it in your personal account, and then you write something from the business account, but then you put something back in your personal account. That's a recipe for disaster, not for even from an accounting standpoint, but from a legal standpoint. Once you intermingle or commingle your funds, you're going to be personally liable for those debts. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure you separate it and that you're very careful with that type of financial setup.
So really, there's a lot of foundation work and a lot of planning that needs to go in before you can say, doors are open, let's go to work.
I think that's a great point. Most people jump right into the business because they're so passionate. They're so excited. Let's say you've come up with an app and you really want to get it out there, but the app causes problems and you don't have a corporation, so they sue you personally. You don't want that. or you start signing contracts and you don't understand the contract. Even as a lawyer, I would hire a lawyer. You know, what do they say? Even a lawyer has a fool for a client if you represent yourself. You have to have an outside person, whether it's accounting or whether it's lawyer, making sure that they're advising you properly, because you could sign a contract that looks reasonable. Oh, these are good people. They wouldn't, come after me. And they will, because business is business. So you want to make sure you have the proper advice and the proper people behind you. It may cost some money, but you have to do that. Don't skip over that point, because it will come back to bite you, as we say.
I think sometimes, like you say, people are a bit too keen to get going. And I think are not professional enough in their approach. And a friend of mine a number of years ago, he'd spent a long time as a chef, was working at a local supermarket, wanted to open a coffee shop because he loved the idea of serving great coffee and lovely cakes. So he did it, but he didn't do any of the setup work. So he did exactly what you said. He had one account that was his account and the business account, and he couldn't keep track of it. And it was very, very stressful. And actually, after 10 months, he had to close the business. So he was financially much worse off. Relationally, was much worse off because he'd hurt people in the process, and he'll never go into business again. He went back working at his old job. And I don't think people realize the impact of not doing that preparation work first.
I think it's preparation work, but also people don't know what they don't know. And so that's it, right? You don't know. He's a chef. He's an amazing chef, I'm sure, but he may not be an amazing business person yet. You can learn to be, but you have to have that advice. You don't have to have a lawyer or an accountant holding your hand forever, but you do have to have someone like that at the beginning of it. I always say, don't confuse your Google search for my legal education. Okay, I've been a lawyer for 31 years. I have a bachelor's, a master's, and a Juris Doctor. Please, I'm not saying that I know everything, but I know more than someone who has not done business law. So make sure you get that expertise on your side and enable yourself to know when you will not know what needs to be done. You don't know everything. And when you don't know something, that's when you have to reach out, even if you're going to have to spend some money on it. You can't always save a dollar.
Understanding risk management is crucial for any business. Can you share some key strategies for assessing and mitigating risks and explain the importance of having the right insurance coverage for small business owners?
In addition to being a lawyer, I also have my, not to pat myself on the back, but I have my associate in risk management. I have an ARM certification. And so risk management to me is one of the most important facets of a business. Now, insurance is one part of risk management, right? If I need to go from here and I need to cross the street, one of the risk management strategies is not to cross the street. Just don't cross the street. That seems silly. I could cross the street after looking both ways. I could hire someone to help me walk across the street. I could have insurance if I get hit walking across the street. So there are ways to handle risk management that's not just insurance. I'm an insurance company. I want you to buy insurance. I believe that insurance that we sell a promise, and I want you to purchase that promise because it's one of the best and cheapest ways to cover your business, or in that case, a home or your boat or your automobile, is by doing that. But I think the first thing you need to do is you need to figure out what your risks are. And you do what's called a risk inventory. So you need to brainstorm. If you could ask other people, if you have partners or employees already, you want to ask them, what are the risks in your area? You won't know, even as top guy or gal, you don't know. So you want risk centers. You want to ask the guy or the gal in the trenches, what is the problem? Because too often people up top, the high level people, we know everything. And the fact is we don't know what's going on the day-to-day line. So you have to ask those people, and you have to say, what are the risks? Well, the risks are customers don't pay us. The risks are customers come to our business and they slip and fall. The risks are customers come and they try to defraud us. They try to say that something happened and it didn't. I'm sure you don't have that where you are, but in the US and Florida, we've got a few people that do that, right? So you have to try to figure out what those risks are, list them. You're not going to remember or know everything, but list them and then figure out how to best mitigate that. Sometimes it's different types of insurance. You have your liability insurance. So if someone gets hurt on your property or if you damage someone else's property, there's also property insurance if there's a hurricane, a fire, a windstorm, a hailstorm, a tornado. You need auto coverage for your vehicle. If you send out people to go deliver pizza, you need to make sure they have insurance coverage for their vehicles as well. Something called directors and officers liability. So if someone sues you for something you did in the business, you have coverage as a director or an officer of that business. There's also, and I hate to say this, but there's also, especially if you travel and you have some money put away, okay, once your business is at a certain level, you might want what they call kidnap and ransom insurance. It sounds crazy, but when you're as handsome as I am, people might want to take you. I mean, who knows? I'm trying to stay away from them. I'm just kidding. But the problem is that there are places you'll travel and, God forbid that happens, you have insurance. One of the most important insurances that we are just starting to get into in terms of the industries is cyber insurance, cyber risk. And it's not just that someone could sue you. Why? Because you don't have in the US, we have social security numbers, or you might have, federal identification numbers, government, birthdays, account numbers, bank account numbers, and that goes public. And then people's information is out there and then they come after you. This can cover that. There's also a lot of times those cyber risk policies cover data ransom. So you have some cell I don't want to insult any countries, but in somewhere. And right, you got to be careful what you say these days. And so somebody holds your data for ransom, the cyber insurance will actually negotiate and pay that ransom just like a kidnapping. So it's not just having insurance to cover if somebody slips in or insurance to cover the property if there's a fire. You've got to think about cyber risk and things of that nature because that's the future.
It's amazing the different things that you have to consider as a business owner now that I think maybe 30, 40 years ago, it was a completely different arena.
It was, but some of the things were still the same. There certainly wasn't cyber risk. I mean, 30 or even, I'm telling you, even when we started we started our company in 2005. 2004, we launched in 2005. So we've been in business about 19 or 20 years. And at the beginning, we had paper files. We had paper claim files, paper accounting files. We had computers, obviously, but insurance was very slow to adopt technology. So we didn't have that type of technology yet. And so we couldn't have thought of those types of things. Something that if you're in a small business listening to this podcast or watching this video, there's something called key-man insurance. And I know it says man, but that's just the way it's termed. But it could be for whoever. Let's say you and I are in a partnership. And let's say I'm doing the business. It's a business where we do computer repairs. You're the repair person and I do the business side. I write the checks. Well, what happens if you get hurt, disabled, or unfortunately you die? I can't do what you do. Okay. So we make you the key man. And if something happens to you, then I get the life insurance money goes into the business so I can continue to run the business. I can hire someone to do what you did and keep the business running. It's called key man. So if a key person in the company gets disabled or passes away, that money goes to the company. So there's a lot of strategies for mitigating those risks because if we're in business and something happens to you, we've got a problem. And so you have to look at insurance and non-insurance ways. The non-insurance way, maybe have a backup person, have somebody on contract, have somebody else that will be able to step up if there's a problem. That could help. So there are insurance and non-insurance ways to mitigate those risks, but you've got to look at.
We would call that building in redundancy. It's quite funny you saying about computer repairs because that's what my business is.
Yes, of course. That's right. And I know you're very good at it. So it's the kind of thing where, maybe you need that. But if you have the built-in redundancy, if you have a number of people, that's less of a risk, right? If you have 10 people that can do it, your risk isn't so great. But if it's one or two, you want to start thinking about redundancy, insurance, backup plans, and things of that nature. And so you've definitely thought of it, but your listeners may not have yet. And so it's something they need to put on their to-do list.
So like you said, the insurance industry's seen lots of changes over the years. How have you seen the industry evolve? Obviously paper to technology. And what advice would you give entrepreneurs to stay adaptable and resilient in the face of regulatory and market shifts?
I think the first thing you have to do is you have to know about those shifts. You have to know about the changes in the marketplace. And you know what people, they often learn this after they're in business for a while, and that is join industry groups, right? If you're in the insurance industry, you join insurance groups. If you're a doctor, you join the medical groups. A doctor isn't going to hire their own lobbyist or regulatory expert to tell them when the laws have changed. You don't need to. You join an industry group and you pay a much smaller amount, right? Let's say a few $100 or euros or pounds per year. And then you're part of a group. They send out email. They hire advocates or lobbyists. They will tell you when the law is going to change, and they will keep you updated. That is invaluable. The dollars that you would save not doing that is not worth it. Joining those industry groups, the Association of Chefs, I don't know. So a food law changes, you know, and then it comes in, you want to know that before it happens. So joining those industry groups is a really great way to stay on top of it, whether it's my business or your business. In addition, some of the items that we're seeing in certain areas is the rise of big data. And so I'm not really talking about AI. That's a whole nother subject, and that's not really my area of expertise. But I do know that there's big data. And in big data, we look at where, for instance, in our business, hurricanes, we run models to tell us if a hurricane goes this way, how much will it cost us? If it goes that way, how much will it cost us? What type of people or risks are the best risks to take? So what type of dogs bite people the most? You know, what type of roof material will keep the house safe if there's a hurricane or a tornado? What type of fireproofing in the insulation or in the wood or in the concrete will help them? And so by using that data, we're able to pick better risks, and we are able to help the customers. Hey, you need a new roof? This is what we recommend. It's better, and you will get a cheaper rate from us because it will save us if there's a fire or hurricane. So utilizing that data, every field can utilize big data. If you don't have it, guess what? That industry group I talked about before, they'll have it. A lot of times they have free data. For the United States insurance industry, we have an Insurance Information Institute that does nothing but collect data on insurance. Now, we also have the reinsurance companies, which are many of them are based out of the UK, of course, Bermuda, the Cayman Islands. And so a lot of those individuals have data because we spend millions, they spend billions when there's hurricanes or fires or big changes in the natural environment. And so I would say the biggest areas are understanding what the changes are to the laws before they happen by these groups. And then I think staying on top of data and how it will work in your industry. And if you do those two things, A plus, my friends, A plus.
I think one of the things about getting together with industry forums is that community as well. So many of us as entrepreneurs work in isolated circumstances that we don't necessarily get that opportunity to speak to other people that do the same things that we do. And the community that you get from meeting other people who are doing what you do is huge.
Especially now. You know, back in the old days, I would go to all kinds of conferences and I would travel and it would always be live and I would be shaking hands. But now a lot of things are virtual or Zoom or Microsoft Teams. And so you don't get face to face as much. So when there is an industry conference, I'm going to an industry conference this summer in Toronto, Canada. And so one of the big things I'm looking forward to is, yeah, I want to learn from, you know, what the latest things in my area are in law, in insurance, what's happening. But I want to make contacts. First of all, if you ever need a job, if the business doesn't work out, these are great contacts for jobs and careers. Second, there are also people that know other people. And so they can introduce you to suppliers, vendors, experts, lawyers, corporations, people that you don't necessarily know. If they think you're a good person, they're going to introduce you to people in their network. It's not just like a LinkedIn or a Facebook. It's, hey, I met Stacey at this conference. We hit it off and we've been speaking for the last few months. I think you should meet him. I think you should hear about his company. There might be an opportunity for you two to work together. You would never do that. The reason I was one of the co-founders of this insurance company. We actually have 3 insurance companies now. is that I went to a friend's birthday party, and another guy who I kind of knew, but I had never hadn't seen in years. We connected. His name was Clint. He's now the president of our company, and he was the original founder with me, along with a group of 4 other guys that we brought in. And so, had I not gone to that birthday party for a lawyer friend of mine, I would not have re-met Clint, and we would not have probably started this company. And we did that in 2002, and it took us 2 years to get the business to fruition. So, being face to face, that wouldn't have happened on a Zoom call. Okay, no offense to Zoom. It happened because we were talking. Frankly, we were drinking, although he was drinking more than me. But I'm not going to say I didn't have a little bit of Scotch whiskey. You know what I'm saying? We won't name any names, but it was delicious. And, the more I drank, the more we had this idea to start an insurance company. And suddenly it sounded doable. I guess after the third Scotch, it was actually doable. And so in all reality, if you go out and you meet people, that's where you're going to make those contacts. I'm such a big fan of that. I'm not all over social media. I enjoy it, but it's not really my thing. I'm a face-to-face kind of person.
I think it's a mindset that you grow into as an entrepreneur as well, that when people are first starting out, they can be quite insular. This is my idea, my business, and they hold it quite tight. But as you develop and grow as an entrepreneur, you start to think, instead of how do I do this, who can I work with to do this? And it's a real mindset shift, but I think it's also a maturing of you as a business person as well.
I think that's true. I think when you start off, you're very full of passion and you do have knowledge, but you don't have the same maturity level. And I think, unfortunately or unfortunately, it does come from age and it comes from experience. Good experience comes from bad decisions. Okay. The only right good decisions come because you made a bad decision. I touched the hot stove and I got burned. I don't touch the hot stove anymore. But if someone told me that, no, I don't believe that. And then I touch it and I get burned. You've got to experience these areas yourself. Now, does it help to have mentors? It does. Does it help to be part of groups? Absolutely. But there are certain mistakes you will have to make yourself. And when you're young, you're passionate and you push forward, and that's great. But having an older mentor or being older yourself as you get to that stage, you've seen everything. You're not surprised anymore. And I think there is a rush in a lot of businesses to youth and that, well, these people are young and they have great ideas and they do it. If you're a young entrepreneur, I support you and I think that's terrific. But understand that being young has an advantage, but it has a disadvantage. And some of your knowledge will only come by making those mistakes. So don't be afraid to make mistakes, but make them smart mistakes. And if you can get advice from lawyers and accountants and business people and mentors, do it. And so that way you're able to take the next step, an educated step. You're not going to be perfect. No one's holding your hand, but it's an educated step towards that next part of building your business.
So, as somebody that's successfully co founded and grown a major insurance company, or should I say companies now, what do you consider to be the most important factors in building and leading a strong, cohesive team, especially in such a highly regulated and competitive industry?
It's an excellent question. Before I get to the kind of the cohesion of the team, because I think that is extremely important, I want to warn people that the most important thing they can do, and sometimes as entrepreneurs, we want to control everything, right? We're control freaks. Well, who's doing the books? I'm doing the books. Who's doing the advertising? I'm doing the advertising. I'm doing this. No, you can't do everything, Stacey. I'm doing everything. No, you have to delegate. The sooner you delegate, the better. I am not good at writing checks. I'm not good at the financial side. I'm a lawyer. I'm a business operator. I'm an entrepreneur, but I am not a financial expert. And so even for my own personal bookkeeping, I have a bookkeeper. She writes my checks. I can't do that. And I don't want to do that. I know what I'm good at and I delegate the rest. Are you going to have a business and you're going to answer your own phones? There may be a service that for $20 an hour or $50 a day or a week will answer your phone call. Use that type of service. What is your time best spent at? So in order in a competitive industry to do your best, you've got to delegate. You have to figure out what is delegable and what is non-delegable. So for me, if I was a lawyer in private practice going to court, non-delegable, I've got to do that. But do I have to answer the phone? Do I have to do my marketing? Do I have to even type my own letters? Do what is best for you as someone that is in your entrepreneurial game. And that leads really to part two, which is outsourcing. And so in our company, we realize that what we're good at is the claims and certain parts of customer service, but we're not good at, for instance, just answering the phones. I don't need 40 people in a room in my building that I now have to manage human resource issues, worry about their lunch break. Jane doesn't like Joe and there's this problem. I don't want that. But I can outsource that for X amount of dollars per month and they are licensed and they will answer the phone calls and they're trained. We oversee them. We don't let them run wild, like, as we say here, chickens with their heads cut off. But we make sure that when we outsource, we follow up, but we outsource, right? You want to make sure that people are doing those jobs for you because guess what? They're better. They're better at it because that's what they do. You're better at the insurance or at law or at computers like you are. You may not be as good at some other area. And so when you figure that out and you outsource it, it costs you money, but I promise you, it saves you money. It allows you to do something that is at a higher level ability than the other item that you would be doing. And those are the two first ones. And if you want to ask about that, and then I can talk about the cohesion, but that's my first part of my speech.
I would just say it's all about operating in your zone of genius.
Exactly. I'm far from the zone of genius, but you're probably sitting right in the center of that zone. I'm outside
Oh,
looking
I
in.
wish.
Believe me, it makes two of us. But again, and of course, there's always luck in business. We don't want to put aside the role of luck, but you got to put yourself in a position to be lucky. The other thing that I think helped us is that we have 300 and let's say 20 employees. Plus and I said we do $1 billion, over $1 billion in annual revenue. And we probably outsource another 200 people in various parts of the world, including the United States. But when we first started, we had 8 people, 8 people. And so one of the things that helped me do is to learn every job. And that's a piece of advice I constantly give to a mentee. And that is learn every job. It doesn't mean you're going to be as good as everyone who's doing it full time. But if you don't know it, you got to sweep the floor to know how the floor needs to be swept. Otherwise, you're some big jerk executive that doesn't know you're this from you're that, and you're telling other people what to do. Not acceptable. I was lucky. I didn't have to force myself. There were 8 people, period. So I had to do everything. And I learned all of the various jobs. And so then when we hired other people to do those jobs, then I knew what they needed to do. Now, the jobs have since become more complex and I couldn't do them. But at the beginning, I learned the basics of each job. What does an underwriter do? What does the adjuster do? I adjusted some claims. I underwrote policies. I answered phones. I played customer service representative. I probably answered, and as recently as a few years ago when we had one of the hurricanes roll through Florida, and for the first 48 hours, we're all trained, including executives, to answer phones. I answered probably 300 phone calls of people calling in claims. We ended up with 15,000 hurricane claims on that storm. I answered probably 300. And so I understood what people are going through. So if you learn those jobs, you're absolutely going to be a better leader and a better entrepreneur.
I think part of it is never being so full of yourself that you'd think that you're too good to do something.
That's right. While I definitely have a high opinion of myself as a lawyer, all lawyers like to have a high opinion of themselves. I'm not sure it's usually justified. In my case, it's certainly not justified, but in some lawyers are pretty justified. But the point is you really want to make sure that you don't let these things go to your head, that you learn that everybody has a role. And if you learn that role, if you start off there or you spend a day with someone in their business, you answer the phone, you spend a day out on the field. I don't know if you guys have this in other parts of the world, but there was a show called Undercover Boss where the boss pretended to be like, I don't know, they were at a fast food drive-through and they had the headset on and they were putting it in and they were answering. It was the boss realized this job was stupid. You had to have multiple people do it. Having one person didn't work. And so if you get out there and do it, even if it's now, it's never too late. Once you learn what they're doing, you will make better decisions because they are closer to the problems, they're closer to the customer, and they're closer to the solution.
If there was one piece of advice or wisdom that you could give to somebody starting out, maybe something that you wish you knew then that you know now, what would you say?
That's an amazing question. And The actual answer, the real true answer, is that you need to have a lot of money or resources behind you before you start a business. Most businesses fail because they run out of money. And so let's say you want to start like a coffee shop, right? We talked about if you want to start a coffee shop, you're not going to be profitable right away. You've got to have money to pay people, to get through the lean times, to market yourself, to advertise, to buy quality product. You start buying bad and then you get bad reviews and then you're done. And so it is so important to make sure before it doesn't have to be your money. It can be borrowed money. It can be family money. It can be a partner's money, investment money. I was a single lawyer, an individual lawyer. I mean, I did well, but I didn't have millions and millions put away. Clint was an insurance agent. He did well, but he didn't have millions put away. So we met a couple of people that actually did. They were very educated. They had just sold a business and had some money. They were not insurance guys, but they understood how to make money in business and how to serve customers properly, which is what helps you make money because you do a good job for your customers and it becomes a win-win. And they joined us. So it doesn't have to be your money, but it has to be enough that you're able to get through the lean times. Because if you think it's going to take you 6 months to start turning a profit, double that or triple that. That's the biggest piece of advice. You people have just a little bit of money and they have an idea. Unless it's a shoestring type thing, there are shoestring types of things you can do online. But if you're opening up a brick and mortar or a storefront, right here, storefront, then what you want to do is you want to make sure you have enough resources put away so that you can survive the lean times and get to success.
So much wisdom there. How can people connect with you?
Basically, just look for me on LinkedIn. You can follow or friend me on LinkedIn. Just Stacey Giulianti, Giulianti. If you're here listening to it, that's how it's spelled. It's a lot of vowels. It's just a whole mess of I's and A's and U's, and I'm not even sure what's happening with it. And just type that in somehow. If you're watching on YouTube or on another video platform, then you'll see the spelling. And you can just go to LinkedIn, search for me. Otherwise, you can go to floridapeninsula.com. That is our top level insurance company. And if you go to About Us, you'll see a very handsome picture of me, which looks nothing like me in real life. Because, if you're watching this on YouTube, hopefully you're not. Hopefully you're listening to this and you're spared the having to look at my face. But thank you so much. It was so great being on this show. It really is a terrific opportunity and speaking to the listeners and the viewers.
It's been an absolute delight to have you on. Thank you so much for taking the time out to do this today.
My pleasure. Thanks again. Great show.